Backs it out, 14 to shoot. 26 seconds to play. Nets are down by 1. Irving, step back three. Oh! Kyrie!
This foul does not get the call. Let's get it back. Durant on the
How's it going, everybody? Welcome back to the channel. The NBA offseason, as I've said in the last few videos, is starting to heat up, and the biggest news of the week right now has to do all about the Brooklyn Nets. As we all know, in 2019, they built their super team, or so-called super team, one of the many failed experiments in the NBA, and one of the latest big failed super team experiments we have seen in a while. They brought in Kyrie Irving, Kevin Durant, and James Harden. James Harden came on just a little bit later in the season. Now Kyrie looks like the Nets might not even re-sign him. They've had a lot of salary trouble. They don't want to match the contract he wants exactly. You know, he wants a max deal, but you can't really, as the general manager Sean Marks is talking about, you can't really sign a part-time player to a max contract, a guy that you never know when he's going to be on the court, when he's going to be available. And Kyrie Irving has been very vocalized about how disappointed he is in the franchise and in the organization for not wanting to re-sign him to that contract. But at the end of the day, you have to understand both sides of the argument. Kyrie is a guy that plays at an extremely high level when he's on the court, but he does have injury history. He does have a lot of personal history with him being out for various reasons. We've seen him out after a few times through COVID. I know he maybe got sick a few times. He had some other troubles throughout his career that he's been out for. And the NBA has been fairly lenient with him, especially when he was in Cleveland, because we knew the type of player he was being. We knew the type of team they were. They were going to be in the finals contention pretty much every year. Other than that, though, Brooklyn has done nothing since building this team. They lost that first year entirely basically because of injuries. We saw Kyrie, I believe, went down fairly early on with a knee injury that kept him out most of the year. Kevin Durant, I think, signed for a year, and he actually ended up not playing at all because he was still recovering from the injury that he sustained in the finals versus Toronto back in 2019. So that was 1 year down the drain. Come in the second year, you've got a lot of hopes. You trade for James Harden. You get close to the playoff time. James Harden goes down with a knee injury, and I believe it ended up being an Achilles injury. Kevin Durant's still not 100, but you know you can rely on him to play well in the playoffs. Kyrie Irving, he's in and out of the rotation, and it looks like maybe he's not going to be a reliable player in the playoffs, but they get into the playoffs. They do an okay job in round one. Play against Milwaukee, Kyrie goes down, James Harden comes back, but he's not quite 100%, and Kevin Durant does his all to will them to a championship, but they lose in the second round in Game 7 overtime to the eventual champions that season. Kevin Durant comes back. You have an entirely new hope this next season, or this previous NBA season. You've got James Harden healthy. You've got Kyrie Irving, as my hair just keeps flying everywhere. You've got Kyrie Irving. You've got James Harden. Kevin Durant is there as well, back. Everyone's healthy. And the vaccine mandate comes out. Kyrie Irving's a part-time player now. He cannot play pretty much every home game this season. He didn't end up playing. I think they lifted it slightly to some extent in Brooklyn whenever he was getting finally towards the end of the season, so he could play in the playoffs. But as we all know, they got swept by the Celtics anyways. Didn't end up mattering or making a different impact, and as Boston fans loved watching Kyrie Irving get swept. But at the end of the day, the main issue is Kyrie Irving. You can't have a guy, and we're not even going to address the rest of the team really, because Kevin Durant, he puts his heart out there. James Harden isn't the same player he used to be, but the main reason he wanted out is because the team was doing bad. Their second, third star was off on the bench or out. He wasn't even allowed in the arena half the time. He was just sitting there or sitting at home and just did not respect his teammates. He didn't respect the organization enough to get the vaccine for his job, for something that he loves to do, which at the same time you can respect his decision. You also have to understand how the Nets are looking at this, because that is a big red flag. A guy that's not willing to do that to play basketball for your team is probably a guy you wouldn't want to be willing to give a max contract extension to, and that's why I believe the Nets are more likely than not going to end up trading him, or at least finding some sort of agreement for maybe like a 1 or 2 year deal that gives them a little bit of leverage and a little bit of security, rather than signing him for an entire 4 to 5 to 6 year contract like they did with Kevin Durant, or tried to do with Kevin Durant, or like other teams have done with their star players. It would make more sense if Kyrie Irving was kind of given a little bit of a buffer period or a year or so to see how everything works out, and then you re-sign him after that, or you let him go or trade him before that even comes to the, or even gets to that point, because that just makes a lot of sense. You don't want to trade him for nothing. You know, right now, in my opinion, his value is probably about as low as it has been, and probably for his entire career, just because of how many issues and problems we've seen him have over the last few seasons. And there's a lot of different destinations that have been mentioned as trade targets. I mean, the Lakers were one team. It was rumored maybe Westbrook for Irving, which I don't think that was ever a realistic trade. And we do have some news about Gordon Hayward for Westbrook being a potential trade there. That is besides the point, though. I don't think the Lakers is a destination that's realistic with how little assets they have. I mean, the other teams, like the Knicks was one team, but does Kyrie really help you get over that hump? We saw it in Boston before Tatum really got big. We didn't see him perform at the level that we thought he would be capable of, so that could be a bit of a worrying aspect if you're the Knicks. On top of that, another team, the Mavericks, was a potential trade suitor. You know, they would pair a guy, another star beside Luka, but do you want to mix up that chemistry really that much? We really don't know what the Nets are feeling like or what these teams are feeling like, and honestly, best case scenario for Brooklyn is you trade him, Ben Simmons comes back, you get an all-star in return. Maybe you trade him for Bradley Beal, and you have to give up a few picks or something, but as long as you get a good return, you still have Kevin Durant. You've still got a good team built around Kevin Durant, so they just need to get an all-star caliber guy in return for Kyrie Irving to actually be considered a successful trade, in my opinion, because other than that, if you just get role players in return, it's probably not going to be a very interesting or enticing deal. And on top of that, for the fans, we all know they were expecting a championship by now if you signed Kyrie and Kevin Durant and then traded for James Harden. So you've been putting a lot of assets, a lot of draft capital, a lot of players into these pools and into these trades, and you haven't gotten much in return. You haven't even got a championship or a finals appearance as a bit of a trophy for it. So it's going to be a tight window for the Nets to make this happen, and whether they re-sign Kyrie or not, it's going to be interesting to watch how they go about doing this, because they could easily be put into the category of one of the worst or most disappointing super teams in NBA history. We've had it with the Lakers this past season with Westbrook. You got LeBron, Westbrook, and Anthony Davis. We had it with the Lakers with Kobe, Dwight Howard, Paul Gasol, Steve Nash, a very disappointing team. You had it with the Lakers early in the 2000s with older Karl Malone, older Gary Payton coming to LA trying to get a ring with Shaq and Kobe. On top of that, you've had the Nets before even tried this with Kevin Garnett and Paul Pierce. The Celtics have tried it with getting Kyrie, bringing him in. It's just a lot of stuff that can go wrong when you try to form a super team, and I think everything that could go wrong has went wrong for Brooklyn so far. And maybe they're in turn for a break. Maybe they get a really good deal on a contract with Kyrie, or they convince another team to give up a little bit more in return for Kyrie. But I don't see that happening. How are they going to do this? We won't see until, I assume, the draft's over, or maybe during the draft they make a move for him. We'll have to wait and see. How do you guys feel about this situation? Is Kyrie going to be traded, or is he going to stay in Brooklyn? I'm kind of leaning towards him staying in Brooklyn, just because they won't be able to find a potential suitor that's actually going to give them enough value in return. That's the main reason. I don't know if he's going to end up being traded, but I do know one thing. So far, Brooklyn has been one of the most disappointing teams in NBA history, in my opinion, and I only think it's going to continue to be disappointing because they are not built to win with all this drama they have going on. Maybe Ben Simmons coming back can improve it, but we all know how he is. How do you guys feel about Brooklyn in general? Make sure to comment down your thoughts in the comments down below. If you enjoy these videos, make sure to hit the like button and subscribe. Thank you guys for watching. I'll see you next time.